level of continuity of focus. So he's here today. I read a few of his papers last November when I started looking into this. I found them very interesting, very acceptable. So I hope that you find his work interesting and accessible too. Mike, I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here in person. And those who are joining online, I see there's a fair number of you. Is it working?
Yes.
Excellent.
And we are recording? Yes, we are recording.
Right, good. So, hello. Let's see. Is this working? No. Is this working? No. It's the space bar, but no. Is there an education technologist in the house?
I should say the tech's been working since 8 o'clock, so that's quite a long time in infrastructure.
I feel you. I've been here myself.
Yes.
It's just something still because it's going on the Zoom. Yeah, so it needs to be on that. There you go. Just yeah, to click. Yeah.
Is that working?
Yeah.
It is. Great. Good. We have the technology. Right, so I'm from the European University, and I'm going to be talking about generative AI. You've seen the headlines. So is it an existential threat to education or a universal tutor? I want to try and get below the headlines for the next 45 minutes. I'm going to start with just, I hope, bringing you up to date with where we are. And I'm going to focus on GPT-4, but as we'll see later, there are other tools. So GPT-4, it's a highly trained text completer and style copier. It has what's called a context window of about 25,000 words, which means it could summarize a 25,000 word paper, or you could instruct it to generate an entire undergraduate dissertation. It can write in any style, in multiple languages, including minority languages such as Catalan or Welsh. It can be given a direct instruction, and the newest version can interpret text and images. So you can see there on the right-hand side, the prompt is given in English. There's an exam paper in French with an illustration, and it can interpret not only the exam paper, but also the illustration and give an appropriate answer. So it's a general purpose language tool. And GPT Plus is now available. It has plugins for maths, science, language, media, business. There is a whole industry of startup companies now that are developing plugins for GPT Plus. It also has an integration with web browser. So it used to be that GPT was trained up to September 2021, and it couldn't answer any more recent questions. Now it can by accessing the web browser. So, for example, I asked it to recommend what tech companies to invest in, and it came back with 2 contemporary companies and the references to the website where it found that information. And sounds a bit geeky, but there's also a code interpreter to run and display Python programs. And what that means is, for instance, you can give it a large database, and it will, and then just say, tell me something about that database, and it will go and interpret that database and show visualizations, visual graphs. So that's where we are. But as I'm sure you will have heard, generative AI hallucinates. Yes. It doesn't know that it shouldn't, for example, invent research studies. It has no explicit built-in model of how the world works. And in human terms, it's amoral. It's a language model, and this is really important. It's a language model. It's not a database or a reasoning system. and you shouldn't try to expect that it will function as a database. And the OpenAI company that developed ChatGPT is quite open about this. In one of its blogs, it says, despite making significant progress, our Instruct GPT models are far from fully aligned or fully safe. They still generate toxic or biased outputs, make up facts, and generate sexual or violent content without explicit prompting. So that's the downside. For the past year and a half, I've been giving it a little experiment that I've asked it to generate a student essay. So I give it the prompt, and you've probably heard the term prompt engineering. So how you write the instruction or the prompt is really important. And basically, I mean, there's a whole art now. You can earn $300,000 a year in the US as a prompt engineer. But essentially, what you've got to do is treat it as if it's a rather dumb student. And then you just give it very clear instructions. So you're a student on a Master of Education course. Write a high-quality 500-word essay on a critique of learning styles. The essay should include academic references and evidence from research studies. It should begin, the construct of learning styles is problematic because. And that's what I typed in, and then I press the submit button. And then you can see below what it's come back with. So in November 2022, when I tried that experiment, when ChatGPT had just arrived, that was what the essay looked like. It had the basic appearance of a student essay. It had a beginning, a middle, an end, it had paragraphs, it had citations, and it had references in nice APA format. It looked like a student essay. And in general, it read like a sort of mediocre student essay. But then right in the middle of it was the sentence, in tracking, learners are sorted into groups based on their perceived learning style, which can reinforce stereotypes and limit opportunities for growth and exploration. Gurung 2004. That research study was entirely invented, and so was the reference at the end. There is a Journal of College Reading and Learning, but there is no paper from Gurung 2004. So it invented both a research study and the academic reference. Why would it do that? Again, the answer is that it's not a database. It's a language continuation system where it can find appropriate language based on an actual academic study. It will do that generally. If it can't, it will make it up. But then I tried again with ChatGPT 4, which came out in March 2022. And there is a huge difference between GPT-3 and GPT-4. So GPT-4, it not only looks like, but it also reads like a pretty good student essay. I would be happy if a student had submitted that to me. And all of the reference and the citations there are correct. So one moral of this is don't use GPT-3 seriously. GPT-3 is the one you can get for free. GPT-4, you have to pay $20 a month for, or you can now get it through Bing. So Bing, the Microsoft search engine, now has a new version that accesses GPT-4. So plagiarism detectors. Plagiarism detectors don't work because the text is generated, not copied. You can't find an original source. It creates the text. There is a new breed of AI detectors, which you may well have heard about. OpenAI itself has released a detector tool. What they do is they work in a very different method to plagiarism detectors. They look for patterns in the text. And in essence, the way they work is on the assumption that AI produces more uniform, homogeneous text, and humans have more unusual or differentiated text. And so they look for uniformity or unusual aspects of the text. So it's a pattern matching process that they use. And it's an AI detector trying to then detect an AI generator. OpenAI, it labels about 9% of human written text as written by AI, so about 9% false positives. The Turnitin company, not surprisingly, because this is its business model, has developed its own AI detector, and it claims less than 1% false positives. However, that was trained on GPT 3.5, not GPT 4, and as I just said, GPT 4 is considerably better at producing human-like text, and it was based on data collected and verified in a controlled lab environment. So their claims need to be independently verified. And also, that 1% only works when there's 20% or more of the text that has been written by AI. If there's only a small section that's written by AI, it's less effective. So, AI detectors are not foolproof. You may also have heard of AI watermarking, and that's another way of trying to say what's being written by AI and what's being written by humans. It's intended to help detect whether a text has been written by AI. So ChatGPT inserts words into its written text from an internal green list of words at greater frequency than would be used by a human. So again, pattern matching. It automatically puts in certain words at greater frequency than would be used by a human. However, that can be pretty easily defeated by programs that just paraphrase the text to remove those green listed words. And it's much cheaper to design a text defeating program than a text generating program. And in fact, there are companies now, there's one here that I found online called that claims to bypass AI content detectors. This tool is useful for people who want to protect their work from being copied, or for people who want to cheat on tech. At least they're open about it. So there we are. Students use AI generators, institutions use AI detectors, students avoid AI detectors, nobody learns, nobody gains, except the companies that harvest your data. So what should we do? Basically, there are 4 different approaches that institutions are taking, and I've talked to many institutions now, not just in the UK, but worldwide. Firstly, you could ban it, and that's what, for instance, New York City schools did initially. One problem there is that it's opening up a new digital divide, because confident students will continue to use AI, and they will challenge the decisions that are based on AI detectors. And the less confident students will be really concerned. They will try, avoid anything that might look like an AI tool, such as a style checker or a spell checker. You could attempt to evade it by returning to invigilated exams, by asking students to state when they use AI. Invigilated exams are costly and difficult, and obviously face-to-face exams can't be run easily online. And asking students to state when they use AI is going to be more and more difficult as these AI tools become embedded into everyday office systems such as Microsoft Word or Google Office Suite, and I'll come back to that later. I think most universities at the moment, at least in the UK, are trying to adapt, but that will require new methods of assessment, new policies and guidelines. A few are trying to embrace. So Singapore, for example, has a national policy of, a national policy of embracing AI, but that has been part of a long-term process of building trust within the company, within the country, and also urging careful caution in its use. And there is emerging policy and strategy. I trawled through some of the policy documents from other universities, and this seems to be the emerging policy. Firstly, to amend written assignments to make them harder for AI to generate. So, for example, you could have a written assignment that's based on a video or comparing 2 images. And at the moment, AI can't compare complex, or ChatGPT can't compare complex images or videos. So there are ways you could amend written assignments to make them harder for AI to generate. You can move towards more authentic assessments, such as project work. Establish guidelines for students and staff in use of generative AI. And the pioneering universities are working with students to develop those guidelines. Reassure and engage students in developing strategies for effective learning, because most students do not want to cheat. They're genuinely worried about how to use this technology and what's appropriate and what isn't. Explain to students how they could acknowledge use of generative AI in assignments, manage suspected breaches of guidelines, and consider redesigning assessment for the next academic year to incorporate AI and develop critical thinking. I think the most difficult one, as I say, is explaining to students how they should acknowledge use of generative AI. And there's a quite lively Twitter discussion I'm involved in at the moment about how you might do that, given that they will be, within the next few months, completely embedded into tools such as Microsoft Word. And so you will just press the continue button and it will write the next sentence for you or the next paragraph for you, or the summarize and paraphrase button. But at this point, I want to flip the narrative away from how will AI impact education to what are new and effective ways to teach and learn with AI. So a few years ago, I wrote a book called Practical Pedagogy, 40 New Ways to Teach and Learn, and based on a series of reports that the Open University had produced for the last 10 years called Innovating Pedagogy. And I went back to those 40 ways of teaching and learning and asked myself, which ones of those might be enhanced by AI? And to my surprise, the answer was all of them. Bricolage, immersive learning, computational thinking, threshold concepts, learning from gaming, any of them could be enhanced potentially with the use of AI. So what I want to do is just give you one or two quick examples that I've designed for this particular session. So one is possibility engine. So, and I've given kind of evocative roles or titles. So possibility engine. In that, the educator or the student uses AI to generate multiple responses to an open question. So you give it an open question. The one here was from an exam question on international relations. In what way is Marxist theorizing still relevant to international relations? I typed that in as a prompt, and it came back with a couple of paragraphs of answer. And each time I typed the prompt, it came back with a different answer. And you can also try rephrasing it slightly. One trick for prompt engineering is if you add the phrase, show how you arrive at your conclusions, it generally comes back with a longer and better answer. So each student then reads the different responses and synthesizes and critiques their own written answer to that. Another example that I really like is as a Socratic opponent. So in an individual or a group activity, students engage with ChatGPT in a Socratic dialogue. They bounce ideas off it. They have an argument with it. So in this one here, I asked it, compare the US and Chinese economic models, which is likely to be more successful in the short or medium term. And it came back with the US economic model is likely to be more successful because China has struggled with corruption and unequal distribution of wealth. So I responded, well, the US has had corruption and unequal distribution of wealth. And we had a dialogue. And it's very interesting that these AI models now seem to have developed a persona. And in this case, the persona seems to be a kind of woolly American liberal. Which is not altogether surprising because they are trained on internet data, and they're also given extra training by whom? Well, the American liberals. So you can have an argument with it. This one I'm going to give a little bit more worked example, an exploratorium. So students explore language by generating games and quizzes. So I said, you are a student of English for academic purposes. I would like you to invent a language game. Oh, sorry, you're a teacher of English for academic purposes. I would like you to invent a language game for adult students of English. The game should be for 2 players, students and yourself. It should be interactive and fun. It should help students learn academic English sentences. Please first give the rules using language appropriate to a student of English. Then we can play the game according to the rules. And it invents a game. So the game is construct and dissect. The aim of the game is to improve your understanding of academic English by building sentences and then dissecting them. So it says, and it gives the rules there. So I've read the rules. It says, fantastic. Let's start with a construct. Please give me a word or phrase related to your field of study. And I type in biology. It comes back with a sentence. In the field of biology, evolution plays a pivotal role in explaining the diversity of species. And then it asks me to continue that sentence in academic language. And we take it in turns to build up the sentence until we get to a pretty long sentence. So you can see it there, a long academic sentence. Then it says, okay, now let's turn it around. That's quite a long sentence. Let's move to the dissect part of the game. And it gives an analysis of that sentence in terms of the subject, the verb, the object, the prepositional phrase, and so on, for that particular sentence that we co-created. And then it says, now it's your turn. Try to paraphrase the sentence, keeping the academic tone, but simplifying its structure. And so I write, pretending to be a student of English, evolution is important to explain why species are diverse. Organisms make their change in time. When environment change, new species come. And it says, great effort, let's refine it a bit. And it refines that sentence I wrote into academic language. So that's using it as an exploratory tool. That's just one game it invents. Every time I ask it to create a game, it creates a new language game. Finally, the final example I'm going to give is a personal tutor. So students now have a personal tutor for any topic. I mean, I've worked in artificial intelligence, designing tutoring systems, and it generally takes about 10 years, or used to take about 10 years to develop a tutoring system. Now, ChatGPT, you have a tutoring system for any topic. So I asked it, you're an expert tutor in English for academic purposes. I want you to tutor me in the English subjunctive. You should assume I have no knowledge of the topic and I'm not a native English speaker. You should tutor through a dialogue with me, continually assessing my current state of knowledge through appropriate questions. When I asked, you should provide a summary of my knowledge of the English subjunctive that I can give to my professor. Is that clear? And then, yes, it comes back with absolutely, your instructions are clear. And it starts off with what the English subjunctive is. And then it asks me to give examples. And it responds to my examples. It says how I might have produced a clearer sentence. So it tutors me in the use of the English subjunctive. And then at the end says, that's an excellent use of were to in the structure of the past subjunctive mood. Well done. Your sentence, if I were to finish this essay, I would be happy, correctly uses were to. Let's sum up what you've learned so far. And it gives me a summary of that tutoring session. And it's not just that it is teaching me. If I asked it to explain something in more detail, it will do that. So it's working as a tutor and a dynamic assessor. So these are just a few of the ways of teaching and learning with AI. And for the last few minutes, I just want to go beyond GPT because it's very much sort of moving piece. Every week there is a new tool that's coming along. So here are some of them. Microsoft Copilot, which is generative AI that's integrated into the Microsoft Office suite, not just Microsoft Word, but into PowerPoint, into spreadsheets and so on. Google, not to be left behind, has its own Bard, which has been trained in a slightly different way to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is trained on a huge amount of data from the web. Basically, it trawls the entire accessible web. and then it processes this into this vast neural network. So this vast interconnected network of around 1 trillion different interconnections. And then it's tweaked, it's fine-tuned to try and remove some of this abusive language, some of the inappropriate use of language with human volunteers. Basically, they generate sentences and then rate whether they are acceptable or not. And they do this thousands and thousands of times. Google Bard has been trained a bit differently. It's been pre-trained on appropriate ways of responding and then exposed to the web. There are other systems, AutoGPT, which is basically an open system which now has goals, plans. You could ask it, for instance, to design an entire course, and it would go off and find tools to do that. And two that I particularly want to mention, Bloom, which is an open science, open access language model that has been trained in a supercomputer in France, and there's a consortium of around 1,000 different organizations that have contributed to that. And the last one I'm going to give another slide on, which is Claude from a startup company called Anthropic. And it's been trained on ethical principles to be helpful, honest, and harmless. And that's interesting. So Claude, say it's a startup company, and it's trained on what they call constitutional AI. The model is trained from the outset in a two-stage process to respect high-level constitutional principles based on the United Nations Declarations of Human Rights and, bizarrely, Apple's term of service. Basically, it's trained on these principles first, and then it's given various prompts and responses, and it's asked, for example, to choose the response that is most supportive of life, liberty, and personal security. And it does a pretty good job of providing ethical responses, of filtering out the responses to choose the one that's most appropriate and ethical in relation to those constitutional principles. So there is such a thing now as AI that's been built on more ethical principles. So that's where we are. It started a year ago, really, with foundation language models such as GPT-3, GPT-4, Bard. On top of that now, there is a suite of AI-based tools from big companies, but also from startups. Soon, there will be the next level of pervasive AI systems for education, business, entertainment. AI will just be part of everything that we use. The big tech companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft don't like the term AI. And Apple had a recent product launch where it launched its new goggles, VR system. It never once mentioned the word AI in its product launch because AI is toxic. These companies much prefer just to embed AI into their existing systems. AI drives Google search, and AI drives Amazon recommender systems. And generative AI is going to be embedded into these systems that we will all use in the future. So to finish, education technologists, education experts such as yourselves, learning technologists and AI companies really need to work together to create powerful and ethical systems for personal and social learning. It's not enough just to let the tech companies get on with it. We know about pedagogy, we know about good ways to teach and learn, and we need to embed them into the new systems. So use generative AI with care. And teaching is a caring profession, and yet AI is intrinsically uncaring and careless. So we need to use generative AI with care, to rethink written assessment, beware of AI for factual writing, because it still doesn't always get it right. Explore AI for critical thinking, creativity, argumentation. Introduce and negotiate guidelines for students and staff. Develop AI literacy, and I think that's an area where universities, not just in the UK, but worldwide, can work together for developing a program of AI literacy that covers not just the technical aspects of how to use AI, but also the ethical aspects. and adopt ethical, take a positive stance and adopt ethical AI for education. And some resources. With a colleague, I've now written 2 books. We was very fortunate. We were in the middle of writing these books when the whole thing erupted. So one was called Story Machines, which is about the fascinating history of story generation going back to medieval times, including a wonderful mechanical poetry machine that was developed in the UK in the mid 19th century, right up to GPT and beyond. And a new one called Introduction to Narrative Generators, for those of you who want to get inside how these systems work. And I do recommend also the UNESCO guide called ChatGPT and Artificial Intelligence in Higher Education, Quick Start Guide. So it does what it says on the cover. It's a really good introduction to ChatGPT and AI. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to turn to Fran and to see if anybody